Hi, everybody. Welcome to PROF 4500 Risk Analysis. Tonight is January 27th, and this is our second class and our third week in class. So, our first week, of course, we didn't have class because our class is on Monday and school didn't start till Tuesday. But we are beginning week 3. And what I'd like to do to begin is to start by looking at our Moodle page for week 3. And today we're going to discuss something very specific in terms of getting ready to write our final paper. Now, so far, each one of you has had the opportunity to start writing. Um, we've written an introduction. We've started to talk a little bit about risk analysis. But when we choose a topic for our paper, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is um, the topic has to be about risk analysis. So, week 3 is all about defining what risk analysis is. So, the first thing that I would like you to do is to take a look at this assignment on our Moodle page, lecture notes, how to differentiate danger, risk, and opportunity. And it just turns out that a lot of times in our life, we don't really have um, a good variation or a good understanding of the difference between these things. So in week 3, I have started to talk a little bit about what is the difference between these three things. So if I were going to define risk analysis, which is the topic of this class, and therefore has to be the topic of your paper, I would say to use risk analysis when you are trying to decide if something is a good idea, and if it is a good idea, how good is it? So, quantitatively, what we need to do is to decide what are the possible benefits that could come out of this decision, and what are the possible negatives that come out of this decision. Now, sometimes the negatives are just too great, and so there really isn't a risk analysis involved. It's just a danger mitigation. So once again, looking at our Moodle page, what you can see is I've put up a situation that was determined to not be a risk analysis at all, but basically was just a danger. And there's a couple of reading assignments. One is the original Ford Pinto memo, and the other is an article from a journal or a news magazine called the Mother Jones News called Pinto Madness. What this is about, back in the 1970s, Ford had a car called the Pinto, and the car was designed very poorly in terms of safety. So the car was designed so that it turned out that at very low speed collisions, the gas tank was too far back in the vehicle structure, and at very low speed impacts, maybe even 5 miles an hour, the gas tank could blow up. Now, the reason that the gas tank was put in this location was an engineering consideration. One, they needed to keep the car small and lightweight and cheap, and they needed some trunk space. Okay. So, in order to make the same weight and the same price of car uh, with a gas tank that was put far enough into the car that it wouldn't have an opportunity or a chance to blow up on impact, you would lose a lot of trunk space. So at the time that they built the car, they weren't really thinking about low impact explosions. They were thinking about these three factors: weight, cost, trunk space. So when it was determined that the Pinto would blow up at these very low speeds, Ford sort of analyzed it as though what are the upsides and what are the downsides to leaving the design the way they are. And in actuality, there are no real upsides. The only upside that you can even think of, and I'm saying this with my tongue in my cheek, is that you don't have to retool it and you don't have to lose trunk space. Well, in the long run, that is not worth the risk to human life. So when you weigh this in the balance, when you weigh more trunk space, death by explosion, less trunk space, more trunk space, explosions, death. There really is no way to weigh that with a risk analysis because the danger is just too great. So when you have something that is primarily a danger, um, you can't use a risk analysis. All you can do is just mitigate the danger. So the correct response of Ford at that point, once it was identified that the upside did not justify this design in any way, would have been to mitigate the danger. Now, other things are not really risk either, or sometimes they're not viewed through um, the idea of risk. For example, and these would be called opportunities. So if somebody says to you, I'm going to give you a bucket of money, and all you have to do is sit at your house for 15 minutes. That really doesn't sound like there's much of a risk involved in that. There probably is. I mean, I would offer maybe a shady deal that you're sitting there for some reason other than the stated purpose. But if there's not very much of a downside, there's also not an opportunity to do a risk analysis. So when we use risk analysis is when we're really trying to decide if something is a good idea. Should we do it? Is the potential downside worth it in terms of the upside? So there can be a couple of reasons for that. Maybe the downside is quite unlikely. Maybe the upside is quite huge. Maybe the downside is likely, more likely, but it's small. Or maybe the upside is is not huge. Maybe it's smaller, but it is pretty likely. And so some of the reasons that we do risk analysis, and a lot of the videos that I've given you this week that I'd like you to watch, are involved with investing. And generally speaking, in a different sort of a class, a risk analysis would probably be involved with investing, or at least with a business decision. I've sort of gone a little broad in this class so that we can use these ideas in different arenas that may be more interesting to you. But if you take a look at these ideas, then we can talk about, for example, when we discuss investing, we can say, well, what about safe investments versus high risk investments? You can take your money, say you have $10,000, you can put it into a certificate of deposit at an FDIC insured institution like a bank, and you can make back 4% or whatever the going rate is. Well, in that case, there is a small amount of opportunity, which is a gain of 4% over some period of time, but there's almost no risk. The only risk really would be like if the government had an incredible surge of inflation so that the 4% that you made on that CD didn't really keep up with inflation. But the investment is a guaranteed, you're not going to lose it. But there's not a lot of upside either. So that's one type of a risk analysis, or one type of an instrument that you could do a risk analysis on. You could also do it on a stock. So for example, there are some stocks that have really paid out well over the years, such as Microsoft. Microsoft has been a good payer, but there were many years where it was flat. But in the early days, it was kind of risky. Nobody really understood what Microsoft did. For those of you who are not old enough to remember, but Microsoft was basically introduced because there was a program called BASIC, which was a programming language that Bill Gates was really interested in. And the idea of an operating system, which at that time was DOS, was really pretty uninteresting. So when Bill Gates and his friends sort of came up with this idea uh, for Microsoft, if if you had bought stock when it first went public, it seemed pretty risky, but the high risk has paid off in high returns. So if you invested a small amount of money in Microsoft a long, long time ago, you would have a great deal of money right now. But there are other companies that seem like they might be the same or might be high risk and then something changes and you can lose all of your money. For example, uh, companies that built memory boards. Memory in computers has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper proportionately over the years. When I first started working with computers, most computers had either 640 kilobits of RAM or random access memory, or maybe 720 or maybe 1040. But or 1080, excuse me. But that was very, very small. Now you couldn't even really open an email for that kind of random access memory. So back in those days, the chips that had that kind of memory, that random access memory, were quite expensive and they were new to the market. So it looked for a while like that might be a really good investment, buying a company that makes microchips or memory chips, RAM chips. But over the course of time, RAM has become less and less expensive because the technology has improved in an exponential and really unpredictable way based on the things that were happening at first back in the 1990s. So, buying a company that primarily manufactured RAM chips would probably have cost you a lot of money. In other words, it would have gone up for a little bit, and then as memory became cheaper and cheaper, the cost went down. A lot of companies went bankrupt and so forth. And as a person, I'll share with you, I've made some money doing stocks, but I've also lost money. And one of the areas of investing that I've lost money on is gold companies. And basically, when I was a younger person, my degrees are in petroleum engineering, and I was very interested in the extractive mineral market. And there were a lot of companies that would find a gold play and they would get very valuable very fast. Well, thank goodness I didn't have a lot of money, but I've invested in those kind of companies, and all of them since that time have gone bankrupt. So my small investment went up a little bit and then poof, it went away. So it's because the market changed or something happened. Somebody else found a big gold mine, gold value went down or whatever. Another thing for anybody, and this last example I'll give, another example is Montana Power Company. The Montana Power Company, which I have put some stuff on our page about the Montana Power Company, but it had a very strange journey. Basically, the Montana Power Company had an awesome, um, base in Montana where they owned all of the power generation and the power transmission and everything about power. And by that um, I mean electrical power and power based on natural gas, owned everything in the state of Montana. And it looked really super. It looked like it was going to be the sort of thing that was going to be around it was around for 100 years, satisfied investors for about 100 years, and it looked like it was probably going to be around another 100 years. Well, there was a decision made by Montana Power Company that they didn't want to stay in power. And so at the same time, there was some legislation in the state of Montana where power became deregulated, which meant that anybody could use the transmission lines and put their own power onto the grid. So there were some dirty dealings with Enron and some other companies. And basically, what happened was Montana Power Company basically went broke, and they reformed themselves as Northwestern Energy. But Montana, the situation under which power is produced and distributed in Montana has changed significantly, and Montana Power Company never recovered. So there were a lot of people who lost their shirts in Montana Power Company stock. Um, and when I smile, it is not a happy smile. I'm saying this like this was a very terrible thing. So I'll actually, there's a movie called Power Brokers, which was created by Montana PBS. I will find the movie Power Brokers and I'll put it up here. And you can think about this in terms of something that looked like a good risk that became a bad risk because the environment, uh, and I don't mean the, the the physical environment, I mean the investing environment changed significantly. So that would be another one to think about. So when you're choosing your topic for your final paper, which we're choosing this week, and I really want your topic to be refined before we move forward, but you can use a risky situation you've been in. All of you wrote really nice introduction sections, and I think most of them could be tuned up to be a paper for you. But it would also be a great idea if you were interested in doing a paper on your area of business. So, for example, one of your classmates is an entrepreneur who would like to open their own business. That is an excellent topic a uh, for a risk analysis because new businesses are risky and there's some things that contribute to success, namely being present yourself, running the business yourself, and having a high degree of knowledge of that business. For example, there's some things that contribute to risk. Maybe you're in an economy, the city you live in is doing pretty well, and then maybe a major industry pulls out of that town and things fall apart. An example of that, this happens a lot, but 10, 15 years ago, the city of Huron, South Dakota, had a bank and a railroad office in the town, and the town was thriving economically. And then both of them pulled out within a year, and the town nearly died and had to reinvent itself in some very interesting ways. But there's just some ideas. So if you look on our Moodle page, the guidelines for quiz number 2, which is quiz number 2, the purpose of quiz number 2 is for you to define your topic, and I will give you input, and by the end of this week, what we need to have is a 1 or 2 sentence topic for your final paper because third week class, these 8-week classes go pretty quickly. But a couple of ideas. Your topic, as I've said on the page, has to be a risk, not a danger or an opportunity. Risk is an exposure to harm that may provide advantage if successfully overcome, and is not just a yes or no, but rather how much. So the topic has to look like this: a 1 or 2 sentence topic, a statement, why it's not a danger, why it's not an opportunity, why it is appropriate for risk analysis. And in that appropriateness for risk analysis, I would like you to discuss 3 potential positive outcomes, and that might be a layered response, maybe not 3 separate ones, but maybe like if it's talking about investing, a great investment potential if these things happen, a medium potential investment if these things happen, and a small rate of return if these things happen, something like that. And the 3 potential negative outcomes the same way. So by the end of this week, that's what we're going to have. So by Sunday, February 2nd, you're going to have your topic refined. You'll present your quiz. I'll give you some feedback. You may have to give me feedback, and we'll refine that topic. So by the end of this week, I'll also post this film, assuming I can find it, about power brokers. I would like you to read the original Ford Pinto memo. You don't have to read it word for word, but just skim it and think about what I've just said, that Ford was really like trying to do a risk analysis on something that was not a risk to begin with. And then Pinto Madness sort of brings that out into a more public way. The other thing, how much are your body parts worth? And this risk versus opportunity. So you have several reading assignments, including Northwest Energy's Risk of Buying Power Ahead. This is also very, very interesting because Northwestern Energy is the new, moderately new, I might have to get that. that article for you. It may be behind a paywall, but Northwestern Energy is the company that sort of absorbed the power um, functions of the Montana Power Company, and some of the problems that they're encountering in a very different regulatory, non-regulated environment, unregulated environment in Montana for power. So there are a few things here that are interesting. This reading assignment, how much are your body parts worth? It looks like that's also disappeared, so I'm going to have to refine that, and I will. I'll find it. I'll find that one as well, or if not. But basically, in workers' compensation, if you are on the job and you have some part of your body injured, for example, you fall and you break your wrist, um, that's worth X number of dollars. Now, we all know that our body parts are not really worth dollars, but there's no way for them, there's no way for your employer to compensate you for your actual loss, right? If you lose a finger while you are working, or you break your wrist and it is not reparable and you have a lifetime injury, there's no way to really there's no way to compensate you for that. They can't buy you a new wrist, they can't buy you a new finger. But so the way that they do it is they said, if we give you this much money, then you sign an agreement that says, I'm not going to sue you for more. So they're trying to assign a dollar value for each body part. And it's just a strange idea, in my opinion. So I'll go back and get those links working, make sure everything is up where it needs to be. But in general, one of the other things I would really like you to watch that I think will help you understand these things is the link on our page that is Warren Buffett on investing. And he basically has 7 rules of investing. For those of you that don't know, Warren Buffett is like the absolute guru of long time investing. And he has made a boatload of money, more money than he and his family and his coworkers and his friends and everybody else, more than they will ever be able to spend in any of their lifetimes. So he set up foundations for everybody and invested money in all these different ways. But he continues to just think about investing. And the way he always does it is the way that works, that for most people is not very emotionally satisfying. He is very objective and very um, steely-eyed and maybe cold in the way that he invests. So he always looks for people who work for him. It's in the film, but basically the 7 points, he always looks for people who have intelligence and integrity. He says he never wants to hire anybody who is intelligent without integrity, because if somebody lacks integrity, he hopes that they're lazy and stupid, because that way they're not going to do any harm. He says always pay attention to facts, not emotion, which I think is absolutely paramount in what we're discussing. When I talked about investing in gold mining companies, I was doing it out of a love for, I don't know, something that I thought was available through the natural world, that but I was making an emotional decision, and it did not pay off for me. He then says, buy wonderful businesses, not cigarette butts. So he says, don't wait until the end of the useful life of that cigar, right? You want to be alert and attentive and look for the opportunity before it's just a wee little speck of what it is. Companies come and go. Companies like IBM, International Business Machines, or how about NCR, National Cash Register? Some of these companies have reinvented themselves, but NCR, which is headquartered in maybe Dayton, Ohio, was huge in making cash registers for a long time. Well, they have successfully, or somewhat successfully, reinvented themselves as a computer machine based company. But some companies don't. Some companies stay too long with what they're doing, and all you got left is that little cigarette butt. The next thing he says, number 4, buy only stocks that you understand. He doesn't mean that you have to understand everything about it, but basically that is within your circle of competence. Okay. So if I were going to invest in private New Zealand soccer teams. I have no idea about any of that. I've never been to New Zealand. I don't play soccer. And I don't know what the market looks like for uh, people buying tickets to soccer games in New Zealand. So it would be unwise for me to invest in that kind of company unless I knew quite a bit about it. And so I'd have to learn. He also says seize the opportunity in the sense that we're not going to be afforded a lot of opportunities. If you see something and you have an opportunity to get in on the ground floor, do the legwork, do the research, find out if you can put it into your circle of competence. And if it really looks like a great investment, go for it. And he also says invest big, not small, because maybe you're not going to get 20 opportunities in your lifetime. You're going to get a few opportunities in your lifetime, and you need to jump on them and make sure that you take those opportunities when they arrive. He also says don't sell because of price fluctuations, and also don't buy because of price fluctuations. Things go up and down. Even solid stocks like Microsoft have a cyclic nature. There's Apple does something better, Microsoft goes down. Microsoft does something new and innovative or gets into a new market and it goes up again. Don't think about this. Think about the general trend. Is it going up or is it going down? Or more succinctly, is it overvalued or is it undervalued? Not do I love this stock? Not is the price today a great price? It's whether the stock is worth more or less than the selling price. That's the reason that you buy something. And of course, you can't predict that with 100% accuracy, which is where the risk analysis piece comes in. And the last thing he says is the only reason to invest is to make more money later on. So you buy stocks below what they're worth. So in other words, if you have a pot of money, you can just hang on to that pot of money, or you can buy a car, or you can go on vacation. The only reason that you would invest it is because you want to make more money later on. So those are the criteria for making investments. All right. So having said all of this, I hope that you're ready to get started on our new week. And referring back to week 3, which begins today and ends on Sunday, we're talking about that relationship between danger, risk, and opportunity, how to respond to each. I have a few documents and a few videos for you to watch. And all of these will help you get ready for writing the quiz this week. So we have a discussion board where you guys can discuss this with each other, and I will post and hopefully give you some input if you post stuff about what you'd like to write about, or in terms of just dangers, risks, and opportunities. And then, of course, comes the writing assignment, this quiz number 2. So we get the topic together, and then here's this discussion forum that after you and I find that topic, you will post 1 sentence or possibly 2 sentences here in order to state what your topic is going to be for your final paper. All right, everybody. Well, that is it for tonight. I hope you're having a great time, and I hope you also know I am available to you if you need me. So please do not hesitate to get a hold of me. Email, text are the best ways if you're on campus. If you're here, please feel free to stop by. But if not, just come by my office. And I hope you have a wonderful evening and week, and I look forward to hearing from you.